Hey.
Hi, it's Craig and Richard here for the first of the feedback videos for this run of Maintaining a Mindful Life. Great to be with everybody from all around the world, and already people are really taking a deep dive into some, I hope, very interesting content.
Well, some big questions this week, Craig.
The big questions, like...
Who am I?
Who am I? Well, you're Richard and I'm Craig, but I think the learners are reflecting in a much deeper way than that. Who am I? It's an interesting question because normally we take ourselves to be our thoughts or all sorts of things we identify ourselves with. But when you sort of stand a step or two back from it and you're just observing thoughts come and go, but you don't come and go, then if the thought comes and goes and we don't, then can I be that thought? That feeling comes and goes. Am I those feelings or just the awareness of them? And all the things that we observe that are, in a sense, kind of limiting. And mindfulness, in a way, opens the view, expands our sense of self. We are those things on one level, but on another level, we're actually more than just the sum of those things.
Yeah, and who or what is observing those things? I think that's the important question here, isn't it?
That's right. And perhaps some of the world's great wisdom traditions had something to say about that. That witness, the observer, the kind of I suppose the consciousness underneath all of the things we're conscious of may be a bit closer to what we really are.
Such a great way to start our course with the big questions, Craig.
That's right. Well, everything's going to get closed down after that.
Coming back to the more practical, perhaps, how long do I meditate for? Some of our learners were asking, until I feel calm or some other sort of amount of time. I meditate for about 25 hours a day. I don't know about you, but I really try to sort of sit for longer than there is actually daytime.
Until you get calm.
Until I get calm, But it's a really important question, actually, because right there's this idea that, first of all, meditation should make us feel calm. Sometimes it does. Let's face it, sometimes it doesn't. Drink 5 coffees and sit and meditate, not going to feel calm.
No.
Right? So maybe it's not really about that. Remember that mindfulness is about actually just sitting with whatever's happening, whether it's calm or tension or agitation, sleepiness, whatever's happening. And there's no right amount of meditation to do.
No.
I think a good amount of time is just sort of what functions. We start with 1 minute or 5 minutes in our courses, and then maybe build that up to 10 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes at a time. But and maybe just finding a time that sort of fits in with whatever else is happening in the routine.
And if we can, without forcing it, but if we can, if we've made a commitment to ourselves to practice, say, for 20 minutes when we're sitting there, and if we're not calm, tensions arise, we're just learning to work with it for as long as we've made a commitment to sit there. We can sit for longer if we want to, but it's good to just sort of learn to work with that rather than sort of stepping away every time we feel some difficulty or adversity. We need to work at our own pace, but if we sort of pull the pin every time we sort of deal with a bit of adversity, then we'll often find that it's rare that we actually sit for longer than a few minutes. And questions around implementing mindfulness in the midst of a busy life. And I don't think a busy or a full or a rich life is a barrier to being mindful. I can remember when I went into my internship as a junior doctor, and we had, apart from your normal Monday to Friday, if you had a weekend on as well, from my roster, it was a 64-hour shift without sleep from early Saturday to late Monday. Flat chat. And for some reason I thought, just conserve every molecule of energy, just attend to one thing at a time. And stepping into a situation, dealing with something complex, but the 2-minute walk from there to the other ward to see another person who might not be well was a 2-minute opportunity just to be mindful. It's no more complicated than just walking now.
Just to reset and conserve some energy, right?
Yeah, and I found that just sort of cleared the head enough to help me to be mindful to step into the next thing. But I constantly down-regulating that sort of stress and build-up of tension and busyness that can flood our day. So I actually found I finished those 64-hour shifts feeling very calm, but very happy also for the head to pillow.
Mindful walking and mindful breathing was sort of implicit in what you were just saying as well. So there's so many different ways of practicing mindfulness. It's just about paying attention to whatever we're doing in any moment, including this one. Are you listening to what we're saying, or are you thinking about something else? I guess that's a good example.
And simple moments can be great anchors, can't they?
Great anchors, Tips on maintaining a mindfulness practice. So, I mean, there are a few things that really support that. I think, as we said, just doing it, starting small and building it up. Obviously using a guided meditation like the recordings on this in this course. If you want more information, we've actually put out a really great video. We started putting out some mindful moments videos, so check that out on Facebook.
Yeah.
We'll link to that. And also, Sherelle, one of our mentors, has a really good. She's put together a form of tips.
Yeah.
So also useful things that you might want to refer to.
Well, worth having a look at. A lot of learners connecting with the ADEPT model, and in my experience of teaching medical students for many, many years, you can't teach them anything unless it's based on an acronym. So it's all about the acronyms, but it really does in a lot of ways sum up some of the key elements of stepping out of habitual mode, but it starts with the attention or the awareness, if you like, and then it sort of flows on from there. But I'm very glad that a lot are finding that very useful.
What's the rest of ADEPT? Attention?
Decision, effort, perseverance, and a tolerance of discomfort, because changing any habitual pattern doesn't feel easy, it doesn't feel comfortable.
No.
And that's not wrong, it's just what comes with the territory.
Yeah.
So learning to feel comfortable with that, and it changes if we just persevere and are patient over time.
Beautiful, yeah. One habit that a lot of our learners, of course, have started changing this week is the habit of communicating. Because how much of the time we're communicating unmindfully, and we start noticing that in a course like this. So there were some really great comments around that as well.
Yeah. So, and a lot of planning what to say next. And we noticed that we're not sort of planning what to say next and hearing the person at the same time. We're actually unhook the hearing when we're planning and rehearsing in our own heads. And if we notice that happening, it's very useful to just drop that and to come back to re-engaging the hearing with the person. That's why the listening meditations, using the sense of hearing, are a very good sense to train.
Learning to just listen.
Yeah.
Of course, it's part of everyday life that we do have to think sometimes about what we're going to say next, or perhaps, something like that, or think about what the person's saying, but it's when we get too caught up in that.
Yeah.
I was training some psychologists this week in exactly that. Sometimes we need to think about a formulation or make sense of what someone's telling us or plan what we're going to do next, but at the same time that can get in the way of actually listening. So coming back to the listening,
that's
really
right.
important.
Yeah.
What to do when others are not listening mindfully? Well, that's, again, as we become more mindful ourselves, we start to notice how unmindful everybody else is. We might be talking and someone's like, yeah, I'm listening, I'm just on my phone, or like glazed over eyes and clearly not listening to what we're saying. So then I think we're faced with a choice. And again, we just might want to make that choice mindfully. We might want to play that game and continue to talk to someone who's not really listening.
Why waste our breath, really?
Why waste our breath? We might just stop talking and see how long it takes them to notice. We might even say, hey, I noticed that you're not really listening, and it'd be great if you gave me your full attention when I'm talking to you. So I think it's about just making those choices discerningly.
Yeah.
But it's a good thing, I think, to have even noticed that other people aren't listening when we're talking, because...
Yeah, and to draw a person's attention to it as well, because the person themselves may not even notice that they're not listening, or may not even notice that it's rude, and it's very easy not to notice those things.
That's right.
The person's not making a conscious choice necessarily, but it's just caught up in an unconscious habit.
Yeah.
And also the subtle things about noticing what's not been said. And that really requires very fine attention sometimes. It's a very subtle cue. It's a very subtle, I suppose, thing to notice when somebody doesn't say something. When you notice that the person's just that little moment where they've hesitated. And certainly in friendships or in therapeutic settings, it's a really good time to say, is there something more you wanted to say? Just to open it up and give the person space to speak.
Definitely.
And often space is a lot more therapeutic, or space in a friendship is a lot more helpful than often filling every bit of space and not listening.
Yeah, and again, it speaks to a much deeper listening, because when we give our full attention to an interaction, we just start to listen on a deeper level, both to what's being said, what's not being said, all those non-verbals as well. We just start to notice all of that stuff. And one of our learners asked about the difference between hearing and listening. And I think that kind of sums it up, really. We can hear things. I can sit here and just hear what you're saying, but am I really listening to it? And on what level? Is it that superficial listening or a really sort of deep listening?
And we need to be still enough in ourselves, I think, to really connect with that deeper listening.
Yeah. On to technology as well, because of course that's something that hijacks our attention, but also, it's a form of communication.
Yeah.
Some learners found the concept judgmental. How do we monitor how much is too much technology? How do we draw a line there? I think it's a really good question, isn't it?
Well, yes, and there are some studies, for example, that look at how many hours per week, say, children, adolescents use technology, and with every increasing hour, there's increasing attentional problems, behavioural problems, and so on. Where do we draw the line? Well, that's for each person to decide. I mean, certainly there can be guidelines and policies around this, but how do we know when it's an addiction? Well, we might be still enough to observe and all of a sudden noticing that we're foregoing other things we actually value because we're just habitually going back. We may actually realise that we're never attending and never engaging with the world because the mind is constantly and addictively, subtly being drawn back
or just
to the
that it's
technology.
manipulating our mood, that we're feeling bad after spending time on Instagram, for instance, comparing our lives to other people's.
Yeah.
So paying attention, of course, again, is such an important thing to do when we're using technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's been questions around as well how we communicate using technology and even communicating in terms of online learning.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of our learners notice sometimes when they're listening to these videos that they're just not actually listening. And of course, the same thing sometimes happens on our forums. You know, people post stuff that maybe goes against the code of conduct that they shouldn't be posting, whether it's, you know, swearing or whatever it is, or offering advice or seeking personal emails, all those kinds of things that go against the code of conduct. And so, again, that's an opportunity just to be aware of that. I mean, that gets flagged in our system if that happens, but it's also a good thing when we're posting on the forums to be really aware of, you know, what am I writing here? Before I hit send, take a breath.
Yeah, be mindful.
Be a bad idea. Yeah.
So we hope that everybody engages in that sort of mindful, open, compassionate dialogue. And so it's been a great week already, off to a fantastic start. And we'll look forward to seeing more of a summary of what's come up on the discussion boards over the following week and the forums. And we'll be with you next week for the second feedback video.
I'll just add to that finally that this course isn't intended to be therapeutic. You know, so it gives us a lot of amazing skills for managing stress and having better relationships. But if anything's becoming obvious that's kind of hard to be with, please, you know, reach out and seek some professional help or reach out to a friend.
Yeah, excellent. So we'll look forward to being with you next week.
See you next week.